Holy sh! Almost just took a face plant in the river with both my cameras in my hands. Welcome to another morning of photography. It's been raining quite heavily for the last 2 days, so I can't think of a better place to be than a waterfall. With the added bonus of being in a pretty dense forest, so when the rain inevitably picks up again, hopefully I'll be sheltered enough that I don't get soaked through. If I'm to believe the weather network, that we're expecting another 7 millimeters of rain in the next hour. So I think it's safe to say that the cloud coverage is staying and we're gonna have lots of even light. As I'm making my way down this trail, I really am just looking down and sort of into the woods a little bit because we have lots of green mosses and still some green needles on these trees. So there could be something to take an image of with some contrast between the greens of the mosses or the trees and then these fallen leaves that still have some color in them. And it's really hard to work with. I mean, it's really cluttered and messy, but if I see one lone leaf or one lone pine needle or something, could be nice. I know I just said I was looking for a scene sort of along the trail, more intricate with just fine details and contrast, but I just stumbled across a nice group of trees that I really want to try and get an image of, and it's going to be a challenge, but I'm going to see what I can do. Here comes the rain. Gonna get washed away if it keeps up like this. All right, I'm gonna have to really delicately work the composition. Just based on the focal length I have, and then this tree here, I wanna back up farther onto the trail so I get kind of like a wider angle of the scene, but I can't really do that because then that big tree blocks the one I'm most interested in, which is the really textured cedar with the moss on it. So I'm gonna actually change my composition just slightly and get rid of the leftmost tree. And I think that might even work a little bit better because the remaining trees all have sort of green tones in them, including a birch that has a couple fungi on them. It's kind of green and it has lots of like peeling bark, so it's quite nice and adds lots of texture and some dynamicness to the scene. I like the image quite a bit, actually. The problem for me is the foreground. There's a kind of a bush and some saplings that are just kind of throwing off the balance. And it would be really nice if there was a little bit of light coming through or some fog. But I'm really just trying to practice my woodland photography because I really like to get better at it. And I actually put a lot of effort into this one. So I'm shooting at just under 1 second exposure, f11, ISO 160. And I kind of have it set up in a 16:9 just to kind of give me an idea of what it looks like. On the back of the camera it looks quite nice. Maybe I'll change the aspect ratio in post, but here's the image and I hope you enjoy it. I just stumbled across a quick little snapshot I want to capture. I won't mess around with this one for too long, but this root, lots of really cool textures and patterns, and it's just fully surrounded by colorful leaves. So take a quick little handheld image of that and carry on my way. It's pretty nice. This is actually in a little bit of a clearing, so there's lots of light, so I shouldn't have any problem with shutter speed or anything like that. I just might get soaked. I've been trying my best to always come to different places when I make these videos, but I've been where I am today in another video, which I'll link right there. Anyway, but I try not to, at the very least, I try to come during different seasons or when different things are happening. So hopefully the amount of rain we've had will just make these falls insane. And you can't see them yet, but I can hear them, and they sound like they're rushing pretty fast. Part of the reason I'm back here today and not somewhere new is that it's the most easily accessible place within an hour with the biggest falls, and I wanted to come to a waterfall today, so I figured this was the best bet. Plus, I'm not gonna be super disappointed, and I know kind of what to expect here. The other thing is that now that the days are getting a lot shorter, I'm really only able to make these videos and go out with my camera on the weekends because I can't sneak out before work or after work anymore. So really I just have to capitalize on any opportunities I have. So this is the opportunity I have today, and I'm gonna make the most of it, and I'm just waiting to peek around this little corner down there and get my first glimpse of the falls. Just before I get down to the falls, I apologize for the audio. It's gonna be insanely loud. You'll still be able to hear me, but there'll be some background noise, and I have no idea how to get rid of it. These little wind buff things work good for wind and some other noises, but just consistent flowing water, really loud, and I have no idea how to sort of isolate my voice from that. So if anyone has any suggestions, let me know. And if you hate this audio, well, I apologize, and hopefully the pictures make up for it. Rain is officially scooting through here, and I'm really sorry about the audio. I'm gonna try two things. Because personally, I still don't know if I like long exposures or not, but I'm debating if I should buy nice filters or not, which I don't wanna do if I don't wanna dish out a lot of money if I'm not gonna actually use ND filters. Anyway, I have a couple cheap ND filters, which are actually they work quite well. Regardless, I wanna take two sets of images. One is a wide scene with a relatively fast shutter speed, then one is a long exposure, and then one more detailed shot, once again with a fast shutter speed and as a long exposure, and just see which ones I prefer and see if I can justify spending money on some nice filters. I'm going to try and frame up the wider scene first. Hopefully my rubber boots are deep enough. Perfect. I think this will give me the best vantage point. I can kind of work in some of these boulders into the foreground, and then hopefully I should be able to see the whole falls as well. Setting my tripod down in water is always slightly nerve-wracking. I'm really testing the limit of my boots right now. I hope I don't soak my boots or my bum. Okay. I'm still not super happy with this. I think it has to be a portrait. Oh, I almost just did something super stupid. Oh yeah, that's infinitely better. So for just a properly exposed image from here, no ND filter, 1/5 of a second, f11, ISO 160. One-fifth of a second doesn't quite freeze the motion, but it's not like a crazy long exposure either. So now I'm gonna get my ND filter and try the same composition again with a proper long exposure. So with the ND filter on, there's this exposure of about 8 seconds. I bumped the aperture up to f14 just to get a little bit longer shutter speed. Same composition, and I don't know which I prefer. But I'll leave that up to future Tim and anyone watching who wants to put in their 2 cents in their opinion if they prefer longer exposures or relatively long exposures. I'd be curious to hear your response. Close up. Holy shit. Almost just took a face plant in the river with both my cameras in my hands. Good job, Tim. That would have been a bad day. The image on the left was without an ND filter and with an exposure of 1/5 of a second. And in the water itself, I don't see much difference between that image and the one with the ND filter with an exposure of 8 seconds. And I think that's just due to the amount of water that was just running through these falls. So in terms of the motion in the water, I I really don't have a preference, and I think it would be easier to just go without an ND filter. However, the difference between these two images that I find interesting and that I actually enjoy quite a bit is the removal of the glare in the rocks with the longer exposure. And that's because my ND filter is also a polarizer, so that just cuts out the glare. So in terms of the shutter speed, I don't see a big difference, but I do like having less glare in the image with the longer exposure. My heart has stopped racing after almost face planting in the river. For the close-up scene, I want to do a little isolation of these little cascades right here. There's 3 distinct little rocks poking through, and I think if I isolate them in the frame, it could look quite nice. And I'm curious to see if it looks better with a long exposure or just 1/5 of a second exposure. Who knows? I'm about to find out. This time I'm going to start with long exposure just because ND filter's already on, and the composition's quite simple. It's just zoomed into those 3 points, and then the water rushing through contrasts nicely with the dark rock, and then there's some green speckled around too, so the image is quite nice, and super simple settings. 13-second exposure, f14, ISO 160. ND filter's off. Now I'm going to try the same composition, but this time with whatever exposure my camera tells me is the best. For the same exposure, the camera is saying 1/4 of a second, f14, ISO 160. So comparing these two images, the longer exposure is on top, and that was a 10-second exposure, and the more relatively long exposure of 1/4 of a second on the bottom. So the image on the top used an ND filter, and the one on the bottom, once again, was without the ND filter. And I think it's quite similar to the previous comparison I just did, and really there's not that much difference in the motion in the water. And I'm even noticing less of a difference this time caused by the polarizer. In the longer exposure, there is less glare on the rocks, but actually in this image I think I like the reflections a little bit. So in this scenario, I really don't see a need for particularly long exposures, and I think even with really nice filters I might forego them altogether, at least under these conditions with so much water running through these falls due to all the heavy rain. I think I want to come back to do a comparison like this, maybe on a river or a lake, even the ocean somewhere where there's less motion in the water, and see if ND filters in that case would provide a bigger difference in the motion in the scene. But in this scenario, on this day, really, I don't see a need for these ND filters, and I'd be more than happy with just the 1/4 or 1/5 of a second exposure. So just looking on the back of my camera, I can't really tell which I prefer more. I'll look at them at post and I'll let you know which ones I prefer, but it's fun. Having the ND filter just adds a little bit of extra process, which is nice. It's fun to think more creatively that way, but yeah, I think I've outstayed my welcome. I've almost fallen in the river one too many times, and I'm getting quite hungry. So hopefully you enjoyed the video. Hopefully you enjoyed an image or two. Please let me know just in your day-to-day life what you prefer more, whether it's the super long exposures or more just getting the right exposure. So with that, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope I see you on the next one.